Alright, we're starting with Toad the Wet Sprocket.
Season 4 is the season that I championed as probably the best or my favourite of this show, both of the first 4 seasons and at large. Well, obviously, if it's the best season, it's from the first 4, naturally. Or 5. I mean, I like the films. I don't know if you call those the best, but I do like them.
They're good.
That's I would put that in the classic run, to be fair.
Yeah.
To me, the show's perfect ending is Yonder, actually.
Yeah, that's a good ending.
I like Devil's Hands, but I actually prefer having those
kind of like that it ends
afterwards.
with 4 movies rather than a traditional season as well.
It felt right, to be honest.
Yeah.
That is just my age showing, perhaps. So it was formative upon me.
Sure.
It was familiar to me for at least a couple of years there. Before the new season came out, and it disappointed me heavily. But even looking back on the original show, occasionally there were, how should we say this, clunkers. And whilst I love season 4, I can't help but look back on an episode like Kifnek gets knocked up a notch. I don't really dislike it when I'm watching it, but I look back on it and I kind of find it like this is one of the least enticing and just sort of compelling or impressive episodes of the first 4 season run. I think they just decided
it's funny as well.
Maybe because they just sort of decided, okay, let's get our Amy Kif episode there. We need to follow up from, obviously first there was Amazon Women, then there was all the Bugalo Roam, and now let's do another one. How about Kif gets, pregnant, Kif gets pregnant instead of Amy, haha, sort of thing. And then they have the Leela idea in there, which isn't really tight. That's kind of just not really focused upon for the second half of the episode. The fact that Leela's the
it is, but it's from Amy's perspective, and it's just sort of a weak character development fable. That's the other thing that makes this episode not that compelling. Because like you said, the only reason Leela's the mother is so we can examine it from Amy's perspective.
Yeah.
And Kif's, I guess.
It doesn't seem to affect Leela very much, though.
Nah, not at all.
Or they don't focus upon it.
Sort of irrelevant.
Maybe there was a deleted scene that didn't... There was a scene in the script that didn't make the episode for time's sake, but I don't know. It's got to be one of the least interesting episodes of the first 4 season run. We were criticising... Leela of Her Own, Ground of All Evil, I think Honking in season 2.
Yeah.
There's just been examples of, or even 30% Iron Chef at the end of the 3rd season.
Yeah.
We were kind of critiquing those ones.
That episode's at least a little bit funnier.
Yeah.
And honestly, the fact that more than a Kif and Amy episode, even it is mostly just an Amy episode. Come to think of it, so much of it just relies upon that. I was probably talking about a few weeks or months back on the Tyler the Creator Mandela thing. This idea of the second adolescence, right?
Yeah.
The people these days in their late 20s through to mid 30s, let's say, sort of have a second coming of age crisis to do with settling down and having children and stuff like that, right?
Yeah.
And it seems like that's the main focus of this episode. It's just not that interesting.
Yeah.
It's it's sort of it's just not done in a compelling way, and I can't find a compelling way to articulate this, but it's just, and that's probably due to the episode just not. It's not very colourful,
They probably just wrote it not really thinking about it, thinking that it would just sort of write itself. But there's no hook to it. I mean, they tried to create some hooks with the fact that Kif's the one who gets pregnant, the fact that it's Amy, but they don't really amount to anything other than, that's slightly off ball. It doesn't really, it doesn't do much for me personally. That's why I don't know if I can call it terrible, because it's not like it does anything egregious or where you consider it offensive or just against the nature of the show or anything like that.
No, it's not offensive. It's just dull.
That's it,
a bit colourless,
isn't it? Colourless, perfect. And it's a shame because I really appreciate season 4. I think the show gets into a brilliant groove. I think everyone's comfortable in themselves.
The Farnsworth Parabox is the most colourful episode.
That's
very much
an example of season 4's genius, in my own opinion. And this is far from it. And for what it's worth, it's probably along with another episode, which we'll get to, only 2 times season 4 really falters.
Yeah.
Whereas I think nearly every episode is total gold. I just think they're so confident, the ideas are rich, they're just firing on all cylinders, nothing to lose. They kind of know it might or will be the last season, so they're just really going for it, and I think it brought out the best in them, to be honest. I mean, season 3 is where the stride really hit, but 4 is where it was maintained, and I think they rose to even greater heights. Just the mood of the season I find just the most fascinating. Just the priorities of the episodes I find the most consistently just captivating.
Yeah.
That's season 4 for me, personally.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, it's a bad start, but it definitely, once the ball gets rolling, like you said just then, the sort of, the thesis of this season is like some of the most elaborate that a television sci-fi show gets. You know, it almost gets to the point of matching certain traditions of sci-fi short storytelling and stuff like that.
I would agree. Yeah.
Whereas, we've probably talked about it a million times now. I love the sitcom nature of the first season.
Yeah.
There's things to appreciate about the melding of the two in the second. The third introduces these, but this season sort of really jumps into it. Things like the Sting and the Wire Fry. That's this season, or is that last?
No, that's this season.
Yeah, I thought so.
The initial brain episode, which is Daddy Earth's Dupe, that's in season 3. But no, episodes like the aforementioned Funds of Parabox. I know there's a couple others in there. I mean, even just going to the ultimate sort of fan homage voyage in Where No Fan Has Gone Before.
Oh, the Star Trek episode. That's a good one.
Yeah, so that's just absolutely just magnificent. And also one of my top favorites is Obsoletely Fabulous.
That's another great one. Yeah.
On this retrospective,
and that's both
that one. I might even script something to read out ahead of time.
Nice.
Because I have to get it right,
And that's both sci-fi and moral fable, in the classical sense, a classical fable. But yeah, it does both of them in the way that some of the best sci-fi short stories or novellas kind of do.
Yes.
Something like Flowers for Algernon. That's kind of a bit like that as well. Feels like something that it could be medieval literature, but it also suits the 20th century sci-fi aesthetic. And that's kind of Obsoletely Fabulous in my mind.
I think if there's anything about Absolutely Fabulous that sort of one would presume it to not hold a place of genius, it's because Absolutely Fabulous, obviously it's not the first text to be committing to something like that. It's the kind of thing where you can draw analogues to certain short stories from the past, from the 19th century onward.
Rip Van Winkle or something.
I think it's Owl Creek is the famous one that's initially drawn from the late 19th century, I think.
Okay.
But or whether it's a film about the nature of reality, one of these Matrix, or one of the many films which people say preceded the Matrix. Some
a Philip K. Dick sort of book.
Exactly. But I would make the kind of audacious claim that, except for maybe some of the short stories by people like PKD, those are pretty high caliber. But with the exception of things like that, perhaps. And obviously I love certain films. But in terms of the short fiction variant in a 20-minute episode of television can count as such, Absolutely Fabulous is the most brilliant execution of this idea. Because it has the audacity to just be kind of subtle and speak for itself and not have any dumb bullshit sentences about how this was that and that was this. And in fact, Bender starts to muse and the engineer yells, "No, get out." And we don't even know if that engineer is the product of some sort of wider... I mean, it is. It's an episode. It's kind of addressing the fact that it's all devised, which even the initial Owl Creek short story never bothered to actually address the fact that someone was using a typewriter, to compose it. Owl Creek, he thinks he's escaping from being hung, and then he realizes that it's all a fantasy as he's kind of falling. And it's kind of, in retrospect, that's the most hackneyed nonsense. I mean, it can be vital in its time, Caligari's ending is sort of hackneyed in today's context, but at the time it's sort of sort of revelatory, because a film would do that, was just sort of bewildering. You want to go to Janet Leigh a lead getting killed off in Psycho. Just unthinkable. In the sort of, you have to remember, people, you have to think about what films in the 1950s are like, and what people's expectations were for multiple decades of sound cinema in Hollywood, to really appreciate why the Janet Leigh murder in Psycho in its context is not just some sort of it's not obvious, or it's not to do that now would not necessarily be out of the question, you know what I mean? It would be considered a bit of a stunt, but a stunt, not so in 1960 there would be people claiming that they would have they were cheated out of their money, you know what I mean?
It's a bit like if you wrote Ulysses or Finnegan's Wake now, compared to back then,
and even never mind the bollocks now.
For sure.
The silent films now by default.
And
you would never make a film like that. It's just not logical if the technology were developed with sound, you know what I mean?
It's a good point to bring this up, because this is a trap you often find people, creatives, when they, look back too fervently on the history of art appreciation.
I agree,
where they lose the present moment, and how you can take those ideas and apply them to, the present, to your current context, as opposed to just homaging or, taking the sort of... what's that word for like cleverness again?
Ingenuity?
Not ingenuity, but that's a good one. The word eludes me, but you sort of take the premises of prior work and just paste them on a contemporary aesthetic. You can really feel the age when people do that.
Yes.
As opposed to something that really feels like of its time. I don't know, off the top of my head, a good example of that would be like that movie that won Best Picture, Parasite.
Yes.
Was very contemporary. It wasn't taking like tropes and ideas of 20th century film drama.
Yeah.
It was very much something that could have only existed in the year 2022 or whatever.
Not 2019.
2019, sorry. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it still feels contemporary, especially because in the post-COVID situation, it kind of magnified the relevance of the film, because it became an even more of an overt issue, the sort of
artificers or
economic inequality. Oh, okay.
Yeah, when like some contemporaneous thing, it might like be draped in like the aesthetic of contemporary topical issues or just visuals.
Yeah.
But then it's just like borrowing its artifice from like traditional sources or 20th century or prior, right?
I can get what you mean.
And things like that don't feel like they're in their time. Like that movie Bait, that felt like, even though it uses old aesthetics,
of course,
that felt like it was so in the contemporary context.
Yeah, there was a weird moment going on in Bait where all of a sudden a certain jerky or kind of stinted like sort of movement of 30 sort of handheld documentary seemed relevant in the age of like, well, that's how people perceive a lot of popular video art.
Yeah.
Visual art, visual as in photographic art, is the smartphones or the handheld cameras and things like that, and that sort of immediate editing.
Yeah.
All of a sudden it all like came in together in this like sort of time loop. It was really brilliant.
Definitely, yeah. But anyway, this is Futurama. Kif gets knocked off a notch. I guess we had to talk about other things.
We might as well. It's one of those things where you got to be careful. And the things like Parasite's very informed, like because obviously a film like Parasite's very informed by films like Kubrick's The Shining and the films of Brian De Palma, I think, as well, / Hitchcock before that.
Yeah.
But it doesn't get bogged down in simply being a homage to.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
It sort of it takes where those films succeeded and tries to tries to conjure like that sort of atmosphere into a more contemporary, relevant, and original storyline. As De Palma once did with Hitchcock, though I guess much more, explicitly a homage in those cases. But I guess part of the point was to sort of demonstrate the friction between 2 points in time, as in Vertigo to Body Double.
Yeah.
The most obvious example, and I guess to a large extent also definitely Dressed to Kill to Psycho, the aforementioned Psycho from 1960 to 1980, 20 years. Anyway, I may as well... Sorry?
Roof Drill.
Oh, that's Body Double, yeah. That's classic. Well, anyway, I guess I'll just close it here. So thank you, everyone. I appreciate it quite immensely.